The gunshot that shattered the Montana dawn of 1873 was not meant for Molly Daniels, but it might as well have been. Her husband of 7 years collapsed at her feet, blood blooming across his chest like a cruel red flower, while the bank robbers galloped away with the month's earnings from their small general store. In that moment, Molly's life as she knew it ended, leaving her alone with 3 children and a business she barely understood how to run in the unforgiving frontier town of Elk Creek. 6 months later, Molly stared at the ledger before her, the numbers swimming through her exhausted tears. The store was failing. Her eldest, Emma, just 10 years old, sat beside her youngest siblings in the corner of the shop, telling them stories to keep them quiet while their mother worked. 8-year-old James and 6-year-old Sarah listened intently, their clothes threadbare but clean, their faces thin but determined, just like their mothers. The bell above the door jangled, and Molly quickly wiped her eyes, forcing a smile. A customer was a customer, and she couldn't afford to turn anyone away with her grim demeanor. "Afternoon, madam," came a deep voice, rough as gravel but somehow warm. Molly looked up to find a tall man silhouetted against the bright October sunlight. As he stepped inside, she could make out his features' weather-beaten face, kind eyes the color of a summer sky, and a jawline that spoke of stubborn determination. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but of good quality. A cowboy, judging by the worn leather chaps and the hat he respectfully removed upon entering. "Good afternoon," Molly replied, straightening her simple black dress. "Welcome to Daniel's General Store. How may I help you today?" The man approached the counter, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden floor. "Name's Brent Foster. Just hired on at the Diamond Tea Ranch about 10 miles east. Foreman sent me to pick up some supplies." "Of course," Molly said, reaching for her pencil and a piece of paper. "What do you need, Mr. Foster?" Brent handed her a list, their fingers brushing momentarily. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through Molly's hand, and she quickly pulled away, focusing on the list with unnecessary intensity. "We can fill most of this," she said after a moment. "The coffee might be short a pound or two. The supply train's been delayed due to track repairs." Brent nodded. "That'll do fine, madam." As Molly gathered the items, the cowboy's attention drifted to the children in the corner. Emma had finished her story and was now attempting to mend James's shirt collar while he fidgeted impatiently. "Your little ones?" Brent asked, his voice softening. "Yes," Molly answered, pride momentarily overriding her exhaustion. "Emma, James, and Sarah." Brent watched the children with genuine interest, not the pitying glance Molly had grown accustomed to receiving. "Fine-looking children. Mind if I say hello?" The request surprised her. Most customers barely acknowledged the children, treating them as fixtures of the store rather than people. "Of course not," she said. Brent approached the children with an easy manner that spoke of experience. He crouched down to their level, introduced himself, and soon had even shy Sarah giggling at some story about a mischievous ranch dog named Copper. As Molly finished gathering the supplies, she couldn't help noticing how Brent glanced at the children's feet. James and Sarah wore shoes that were visibly too small, their toes pressing against the worn leather. Emma's situation was worse. Her shoes had split at the seams, crudely repaired with twine that was already fraying. Brent returned to the counter as Molly tallied the bill. "That'll be $7.42, she said. He counted out the money carefully, then hesitated before pushing it across the counter. "Mrs. Daniels, I hope you don't mind my saying, but those children could use some new shoes before winter sets in." The observation, though kindly meant, struck Molly like a slap. Heat rushed to her face, not anger at his comment, but shame at her inability to provide even basic necessities for her children. "I'm well aware of that, Mr. Foster," she said stiffly. "Times have been difficult since my husband passed." Regret immediately crossed Brent's face. "I apologize, madam. I didn't mean to overstep." "No, Molly sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "You're right. They do need shoes. The cobbler in town expects payment upfront, and right now food on the table takes precedence. Brent nodded, his eyes thoughtful. He gathered his purchases without another word about the children's shoes, and Molly assumed he was eager to escape the awkwardness his observation had created. But 3 days later, Brent Foster returned to the store. This time, he carried a small crate in addition to his saddlebags. "Afternoon, Mrs. Daniels," he greeted, setting the crate on the counter. "Mr. Foster," Molly acknowledged, curious about his return so soon. "More supplies for the diamond tea, not exactly," he gestured to the crate. "I brought something you might find useful." Confused, Molly peered into the crate. Inside lay several pieces of quality leather, a collection of thick threads, small metal tools, and what appeared to be wooden lasts in various sizes. "It's a cobbler's starter kit," Brent explained. "Belonged to the previous ranch hand. He moved back east, didn't have room to take it with him." Molly stared at the materials, then back at Brent. "I don't understand." "I noticed your skill with that needle," he said, nodding toward where she'd been mending a shirt behind the counter. "Thought maybe you might be able to make use of these." "Mr. Foster, I appreciate the thought, but I've never made a shoe in my life." Brent shrugged. "My ma used to say that necessity is the mother of invention. Besides, there's a book in there with patterns and instructions." Molly touched the leather hesitantly. It was good quality, supple yet sturdy. "I couldn't possibly accept this without payment." "Consider it payment for holding those extra coffee beans for me next delivery," he said with a slight smile. Then, looking at the children who were watching the exchange with curious eyes, he added more softly, "They ain't got shoes, Mrs. Daniels." Something in his direct assessment, delivered without pity but with genuine concern, broke through Molly's stubborn pride. She looked at her children, at their hopeful faces, then back at the leather that could protect their feet through the harsh Montana winter. "Then I'll sew till they do," she answered firmly, her voice hardly more than a whisper. The smile that spread across Brent's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "That's the spirit, madam." That evening, after the children were in bed, Molly pulled out the cobbler's manual and began to study. The illustrations were clear, the instructions detailed. She ran her fingers over the leather, imagining it transformed into sturdy shoes for her children. It seemed an impossible task, yet what choice did she have? Winter was coming, and her children needed shoes. For the next week, Molly worked late into the night. Her first attempt at a shoe was clumsy, misshapen, and unlikely to last through a single day of wear. The second was better, but still far from what her children needed. By the third attempt, she began to understand the techniques better, her nimble fingers finding their way around the unfamiliar tools. Brent Foster returned to the store 10 days after delivering the cobbler's kit. The bell above the door announced his arrival, and Molly looked up from the counter where she was carefully stitching the upper of a small boot to its sole. "Mr. Foster," she greeted, setting aside her work. "Mrs. Daniels." His eyes went to the half-finished boot. "I see you're putting that kit to good use." "Trying to," she admitted. "It's more challenging than I anticipated, but I'm learning." "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the boot. Molly handed it over reluctantly, aware of its imperfections. Brent examined it carefully, turning it in his calloused hands. "This is fine work for someone who's never made shoes before," he said, genuinely impressed. "Strong stitching, good tension on the leather." "The heel is crooked," Molly pointed out. "A little," he conceded with a smile. "But nothing that would stop a child from running." He handed the boot back to her. "You've got talent, Mrs. Daniels." The unexpected praise warmed Molly more than it should have. "Thank you," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Did you need supplies today?" "Yes, madam, and—" He hesitated. "I was wondering if you and your children might like to join me for Sunday dinner tomorrow. The ranch cook makes a fine roast, and the foreman said I could extend the invitation." The offer caught Molly by surprise. It had been months since anyone had invited them anywhere social. After Robert's death, the initial outpouring of community support had gradually dwindled, leaving Molly and her children increasingly isolated. "That's very kind, Mr. Foster, but the children would enjoy seeing the horses," he added. "And I thought you might appreciate a meal you didn't have to cook yourself." Molly glanced toward the back room where her children were playing. A proper Sunday dinner, a chance for them to see something beyond the four walls of their store and small living quarters. "We'd be delighted to accept," she heard herself say. Brent's smile was worth any doubts she might have had. "Wonderful. I'll come by with the wagon around noon if that suits." The next day, Molly dressed the children in their best clothes, which weren't much, but she'd stayed up late pressing and mending to make them presentable. For herself, she wore her one good dress, a deep blue that had once been Robert's favorite. She hesitated before adding a small cameo brooch, the first time she'd worn any adornment since becoming a widow. Brent arrived precisely at noon, the wagon clean and a blanket spread over the seat for comfort. He'd clearly made an effort with his own appearance clean-shaven, hair neatly trimmed, wearing a crisp white shirt under his vest. "You look lovely, Mrs. Daniels," he said as he helped her onto the wagon seat. "Thank you," Molly replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "And please call me Molly." "Only if you'll call me Brent," he responded with a warm smile. The Diamond Tea Ranch sprawled across a valley backed by pine-covered mountains. The main house was substantial but not ostentatious, with a wide porch and sturdy outbuildings. Several cowboys paused in their Sunday activities to wave as Brent drove the wagon toward the house. "It's beautiful," Molly said, taking in the peaceful scene. "It is," Brent agreed. "Been working ranches all my life, but this is one of the finest operations I've seen. Owner's fair, pays on time, and treats his men well." Dinner was served in the ranch house dining room where the owner, Thomas Thornfield, a silver-haired gentleman with kind eyes, welcomed them warmly. The foreman, Jack Miller, and his wife Helen were also present, along with several other ranch hands who'd cleaned up impressively for the occasion. The food was abundant and delicious: roast beef with gravy, mashed potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from the ranch garden. Molly watched her children eat with healthy appetites, their eyes wide at the spread before them. For the first time in months, she felt some of the weight lift from her shoulders. After dinner, Brent took them on a tour of the ranch, showing the children the horses, introducing them to the friendly ranch dog, who indeed lived up to the mischievous reputation Brent had described, and even letting them collect eggs from the henhouse under the watchful eye of the cook. As they walked back toward the wagon in the late afternoon light, Brent and Molly fell a few steps behind the excited children. "Thank you for today," Molly said quietly. It's been wonderful for all of us." "It's been my pleasure," Brent replied. "It's not often we get the company of a beautiful woman and 3 lively children at the ranch." The compliment caught Molly off guard. She'd stopped thinking of herself as beautiful months ago when grief and worry had etched permanent lines around her eyes. "You're too kind," she murmured. "Not kind," Brent corrected gently. "Just honest." On the ride back to town, with the children dozing in the back of the wagon, Molly found herself talking more freely than she had in ages. She told Brent about growing up in Pennsylvania, about meeting Robert when he came east to buy goods for his new store, about their journey west and the early struggling years of the business. Brent, in turn, spoke of his childhood on a small farm in Ohio, his decision to head west after the war, the various ranches he'd worked on across the territories. His voice was melodic in the gathering dusk, his stories painted with vivid details that made Molly feel as though she could see the places he described. When they reached the store, Brent helped her wake the children and usher them inside. At the door, he paused. "I'd like to call on you again, Molly," he said, his usual confidence tempered with a touch of uncertainty. "If that would be welcome." Molly hesitated only briefly. "It would be very welcome, Brent." His smile in response was like finding an unexpected gift. Over the next few weeks, Brent visited regularly. Sometimes he brought small treats for the children: peppermint sticks or a new picture book. Other times he arrived with practical items. A set of better knives for the leather work, a special oil to treat the finished shoes, even a small rocking chair that fit Sarah perfectly. With each visit, Molly found herself looking forward to his arrival more eagerly. She began to notice little things, the way the corner of his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how he always knelt to speak to her children at their level, the gentleness of his hands despite their strength and calluses. Meanwhile, her shoemaking skills improved dramatically. The first complete pair she finished was for Sarah, whose delight at the sturdy little boots brought tears to Molly's eyes. James received his next, and though they weren't perfect, they fit far better than his old ones. Emma patiently waited her turn, helping her mother with the measuring and cutting for her own shoes. Word began to spread through town about Molly's new skill. Mrs. Peterson from the boarding house asked if Molly might repair her son's boots. The blacksmith inquired about a custom pair to accommodate his unusually wide feet. Gradually, a new source of income emerged, modest at first, but growing as Molly's reputation for quality work expanded. One crisp November afternoon, Brent arrived at the store to find Molly teaching Emma how to add decorative stitching to a pair of ladies' boots commissioned by the banker's wife. "Looks like you've found yourself a new calling," he observed, watching the pair work together with practiced coordination. Molly looked up with a smile that reached her eyes, something that happened more frequently these days. "It seems I have, Mrs. Thornhill has ordered 2 pairs for Christmas gifts, and the stagecoach driver asked if I could repair all the company's boots for the winter season." "That's wonderful news," Brent said, genuine pleasure in his voice. "I've been thinking," Molly continued, setting aside her work. "With the extra income, I might be able to hire someone to help in the store, just part-time, mind you, but it would free me to focus more on the shoemaking." "Smart business sense," Brent nodded approvingly. "Your husband would be proud." The mention of Robert didn't bring the sharp pain it once had. Instead, Molly felt a gentle warmth, a sense that he would indeed approve of how she was rebuilding their life. "Thank you," she said softly. Then, noting the package under Brent's arm, she asked, "What have you brought today?" "Something for you, actually," he replied, setting the parcel on the counter. "Open it." Inside was a beautiful leather apron clearly designed for a cobbler. The leather was soft but durable, with multiple pockets for tools and a custom stamp in the corner. "MD, Shoes and Repairs." "Brent," Molly breathed, running her fingers over the fine craftsmanship. "This is exquisite." "Had it made special in Helena," he said, watching her reaction with pleasure. "Thought you should look the part of a professional." The thoughtfulness of the gift overwhelmed her. Without thinking, Molly reached across the counter and squeezed his hand. "Thank you, for everything, not just this, but for." She gestured vaguely, encompassing all that had changed since he walked into her store that first day. Brent turned his hand to hold hers properly, his fingers warm and strong. Molly eyed the store door burst open, startling them both. Molly withdrew her hand quickly as Sheriff Tucker strode in, his expression grim. "Mrs. Daniels, Foster," he greeted tersely. "Got some news you should hear. The Jenkins gang was spotted near Clearwater yesterday. Word is they're headed this way." Molly went cold. The Jenkins gang, the same outlaws who had robbed her store and killed her husband during their escape. "Are you certain?" she asked, her voice hardly above a whisper. "Afraid so." "They hit the bank in Clearwater, shot the teller. Man lived long enough to identify them." The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Given what happened with Robert, I thought you should know. I'm deputizing men to help protect the town if they show up." "I'll volunteer," Brent said immediately. Sheriff Tucker nodded. "Figured as much, meeting at the jailhouse in an hour." He tipped his hat to Molly. "Madam, don't mean to frighten you, but best you and the children stay close to home for the next few days." After the sheriff left, a heavy silence fell over the store. Molly's hands trembled slightly as she folded the leather apron back into its wrapping. "Molly," Brent said gently, "nothing's going to happen to you or the children, I promise you that." She looked up at him, fear and painful memories evident in her eyes. Don't make promises you can't keep, Brent. Robert promised me the same thing the morning he died. The words hung between them, sharp and painful. Brent reached across the counter again, taking both her hands in his. I understand your fear, he said solemnly. But I need you to understand something. I won't let anyone harm you or your children. Not while I draw breath. The fierce protectiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it kindled something warm and vital in Molly's chest, something she had thought died with Robert. Be careful, she whispered. Please. Always am, he assured her with a gentle squeeze of her hands before releasing them. I'd better get to that meeting. I'll stop by later to check on you and the children. After Brent left, Molly called the children in from the back room where they'd been playing. She explained in simple terms that some bad men might be coming to town, and they needed to stay inside for a few days. Emma, old enough to remember the day her father died, grew solemn and put a protective arm around her younger siblings. That night, after the children were asleep, Molly sat by the window of their living quarters above the store, a shotgun across her lap. Robert had taught her to use it years ago, though she'd never had cause to fire it at anything more threatening than a coyote near their chicken coop. A soft knock at the back door startled her. Gripping the shotgun, she approached cautiously. Who's there? She called. It's Brent, Molly. Relief flooded through her as she unbolted the door. Brent stepped inside, his expression serious but calm. Everything all right? He asked, his eyes going to the shotgun in her hands. Yes, she said, setting the weapon aside. The children are asleep. Did the meeting go well? As well as can be expected, sheriffs organized men in shifts to watch the approaches to town. Brent removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. I've got the midnight to dawn watch. You should rest then, Molly said, gesturing to a chair at the small kitchen table. I will. Just wanted to check on you first. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the lamp between them casting soft shadows. Outside, the wind had picked up, whistling around the eaves of the building. Molly, Brent said suddenly, his voice low and intent. There's something I need to say in case don't, she interrupted, not wanting to hear words spoken out of a sense of impending danger. Please, he insisted gently. It's important. Molly nodded reluctantly. I came to Elk Creek because I was tracking the Jenkins gang, Brent said, the admission clearly difficult for him. My younger brother was killed by them in a holdup in Wyoming last year. I've been following their trail ever since, working ranches to support myself while I hunted them. Molly stared at him, trying to process this revelation. You're a bounty hunter? No, Brent shook his head. Just a man seeking justice, or revenge maybe. I'm not sure I knew the difference anymore. Why are you telling me this now? Brent reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of touching hers. Because things changed when I met you. When I walked into your store that day, I was a man consumed by hate. But seeing you there, your strength, your determination to care for your children, despite everything, it reminded me that there's more to life than vengeance. Molly's heart hammered in her chest as Brent continued. These past weeks, watching you create something beautiful from that leather, seeing how you've built a new life for yourself and your children. It's changed me, Molly. You've changed me. Brent, she began, but he gently pressed on. I know it's too soon. I know you're still grieving Robert, and I would never presume to take his place. But I need you to know that whatever happens with the Jenkins gang, meeting you has been the greatest blessing of my life. Tears welled in Molly's eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of recognition of seeing clearly for the first time in months. It's not too soon, she whispered. Robert will always be part of me, part of our children, but my heart didn't die with him, though I thought it had. Brent's face transformed with hope. Molly, are you saying? A distant gunshot interrupted him, followed by shouting from the direction of the main street. Stay here, Brent ordered, already on his feet. Lock the door behind me. Be careful, Molly pleaded, echoing her earlier words but with deeper feeling now. Brent paused at the door, his eyes locked with hers. I'll come back to you. That's a promise I intend to keep. Then he was gone, and Molly was left alone with her fears and the precious new hope that had just been kindled between them. The night that followed was the longest of Molly's life. More gunshots rang out, then an eerie silence broken only by occasional shouts and the sound of horses. She kept vigil by the window, watching for any movement in the alley behind the store, the shotgun ready. Near dawn, when the eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, heavy footsteps approached the back door. Molly raised the shotgun, her finger trembling near the trigger. "Molly, it's me," came Brent's voice, strained but alive. She rushed to unlock the door. Brent stumbled in, his right arm bound in a makeshift bandage, blood seeping through the cloth. "You're hurt," Molly gasped, helping him to a chair. "Just a graze," he assured her, though his face was pale with pain. "The Jenkins gang is finished, Molly, 2 dead, including Luther Jenkins himself. The rest captured." Relief and concern warred within her as she carefully removed the bandage to examine his wound. "This needs proper cleaning and stitching. I'll send Emma for the doctor as soon as it's light." "No need to wake her," Brent said. "You're good with a needle. I trust your hands." The simple statement conveyed far more than confidence in her sewing skills. Molly met his gaze, seeing in his eyes everything he'd confessed before the gunshots had interrupted them. Carefully, with the same precision she'd developed making shoes, Molly cleaned and stitched the bullet wound on Brent's arm. Her hands remained steady despite her racing heart. When she finished, Brent caught her hand in his. "Thank you." "It seems I keep finding new uses for my needle," she said with a small smile. "Molly," Brent said seriously, "about what I was saying earlier." "I meant what I said too," she assured him quietly. "It's not too soon to feel what I'm feeling." The tender moment was interrupted by small footsteps on the stairs. Emma appeared in the doorway, her eyes widening at the sight of Brent's bandaged arm. "Mr. Foster, are you hurt bad?" she asked anxiously. "Not bad at all, Miss Emma," he assured her with a smile. "Your ma fixed me right up." Emma approached cautiously. "Did you get the bad men, the ones who—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Brent nodded solemnly. "Yes, Emma, they won't hurt anyone else ever again." The girl's face reflected complex emotions: relief, lingering sadness, and something like closure. "Pa would be glad," she said finally. "Yes," Molly agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "He would be." In the weeks that followed, Elk Creek gradually returned to normal. The Jenkins gang incident became the talk of the territory, with Brent receiving particular praise for his bravery during the confrontation. Though he downplayed his role, it was widely acknowledged that his warning shot had alerted the town in time to prevent a surprise attack. Molly's shoe business continued to flourish. With Emma's help and her own improving skills, she could barely keep up with orders. The store remained open, now managed part-time by the widow Prescott, who was grateful for the income and the company. Brent visited almost daily, his relationship with Molly deepening in the natural, unhurried way of two people who recognize in each other something worth nurturing. The children grew fond of him, especially James, who followed Brent around like a shadow whenever he visited, absorbing every bit of cowboy knowledge offered. One crisp December evening, with snow falling gently outside, Brent arrived at the store just as Molly was closing up. He carried a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Evening, Molly," he greeted, stamping snow from his boots. "Thought you might like to see this." Inside the package was a newspaper from Helena. On the front page was an article about the Jenkins gang capture, with a smaller piece below it titled "Widow's Ingenuity Creates Thriving Business." "They wrote about me?" Molly asked, astonished as she scanned the article. "Seems word of your shoemaking skills has spread beyond Elk Creek," Brent said proudly. "The reporter was passing through last week, must have heard about you from someone in town." Molly read the piece with growing amazement. It praised her craftsmanship and entrepreneurial spirit, noting how she had transformed tragedy into opportunity through determination and skill. "I can hardly believe it," she murmured. "I can," Brent said softly. "You're remarkable, Molly Daniels." She looked up at him, this man who had walked into her store and inadvertently into her heart. "I have something for you too," she said. "Wait here." Molly went to the back room and returned with a pair of finely crafted boots. They were made of the best leather she had, with intricate stitching and perfect proportions. "I've been working on these at night after the children are asleep," she explained as Brent examined them with admiration. "I wanted them to be perfect." "They're magnificent," he said, genuinely impressed. "Try them on," Molly urged. As Brent removed his old boots and slipped on the new ones, his expression changed from admiration to confusion. There was something in the right boot pressing against his foot. He reached inside and pulled out a small folded paper. "What's this?" he asked, unfolding it. In Molly's neat handwriting were the words, "The answer is yes." Brent looked up, his eyes questioning. "You haven't asked the question yet," Molly said with a small smile. "But when you do, that's my answer." Understanding dawned on Brent's face, followed by a joy so pure it transformed his weather-beaten features. He took Molly's hands in his. "I was waiting for the right moment," he said, his voice husky with emotion. "Wanted to do it properly." "This is proper enough for me," Molly assured him, her eyes shining. Brent knelt before her, still holding her hands. "Molly Daniels, you've brought light back into my life when I thought there was only darkness left. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," Molly whispered, tears of happiness spilling onto her cheeks. "Yes, Brent Foster, I will." He rose and gathered her in his arms, their kiss a promise of the life they would build together. Spring came early to Elk Creek in 1874. The hills turned green, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and on a perfect April morning, Molly Daniels became Molly Foster in a ceremony attended by the entire town. Emma, James, and Sarah stood proudly beside their mother, each wearing new shoes crafted specially for the occasion. The Diamond T Ranch owner, Thomas Thornfield, offered Brent a permanent position as his foreman, along with use of a comfortable house just a mile from town. It was large enough for the family with room to spare, including space for Molly's now thriving shoemaking business. On their wedding night, after the children had finally fallen asleep in their new rooms, Brent and Molly sat on the porch of their home, looking out at the star-filled Montana sky. "Did you ever imagine when you walked into my store that day that we'd end up here?" Molly asked, her head resting on her husband's shoulder. Brent's arm tightened around her. "I couldn't have imagined anything this perfect," he admitted. "I was a man with nothing but revenge in his heart. You gave me something to live for again." "And you gave me hope when I thought all was lost," Molly replied. "When you pointed out the children's shoes or lack of them, I was so embarrassed, so ashamed." "And now look at you," Brent said proudly. "The finest shoemaker in 3 territories, if that last order from the governor's office is any indication." Molly laughed softly. "All because a handsome cowboy noticed my children's bare feet and I was too stubborn to accept charity." "Not charity," Brent corrected gently. "Never that. Just one broken person recognizing another and offering what help they could." Molly turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Brent Foster." "And I love you, Molly Foster," he replied, sealing the words with a kiss that held all the promise of their future together, a future built on resilience, shared strength, and the simple, powerful truth that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with nothing more than a need, a skill, and the courage to say, "Then I'll sew till they do."